Example. You know, I don't know where you live, but sometimes it takes me too long to get downtown. What about you? I don't know, but I know one thing, Dad, that this city is just getting bigger and bigger, right? 700,000 strong. People live, work, and dine and play in places that they never have. And so we have to be very focused on how we get around this city. So if we are to make significant changes in how fast we move, how much it costs, how safe it is, what are we willing to do to get there? Are we willing to prioritize some of our corridors just for public transit? All right. Does that mean you're going to take those cars off of 16th Street? All right. That's the question. Are we going to look to add bus routes in our city? Should we think about adding additional school transportation in our city? Is there something else that you want to do? More bike routes, car-free days on different corridors? Because these are the questions. You see, Chuck, what we have to deal with? There is no low-hanging fruit. They're all tough questions, and some of them will involve trade-offs. You're going to have to give up something to get something else. Are you with me? Yeah. What are we willing to do to close the achievement gap? What are we willing to do? Does that mean I have to invest more over here and less over here? Does that mean I have to push this faster and this pause for a little while? Does that mean that I have to reimagine vocational education in the District of Columbia? Does that mean that we have to challenge all of our business partners and council partners to reprioritize 2-year and 4-year education at the university level? Yes. So we have to do all of those things to get our kids, our students, our residents ready for the jobs of our future. Does that also mean that we have to make investments in companies to move here? Because we have to continue to create the jobs that provide incomes, that provide DC sustaining incomes. Are you with me? Now, are you willing to say that every person who's born here and raised here and chooses to live here should have a pathway to a middle income in Washington, D.C.? So that means focusing on how we do adult learning and connect our Department of Employment Services to our University of the District of Columbia and all the universities that serve our students. It also means making sure that we're looking at those early years from 0 to 5, that we're keeping families in the District of Columbia by making sure we have quality, affordable child care in every ward of the city. And that's what we intend to do. In part of the changes that we're making to our organization is aligning those lifelong learning goals and workforce goals in our education cluster. So with that, the WIC, our Workforce Investment Council, and the Department of Employment Services will now be in our education cluster, which we know is a good thing. Now, let's ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to cut gun deaths in half in the District of Columbia? Many of you have had the unfortunate experience of living in a neighborhood, of having a loved one involved in a violent crime. I get, unfortunately, devastating communication anytime someone is killed in the District of Columbia. So we know that as a city, we won't tolerate violence escalating in our city. We also recognize that it is an approach that requires police involvement, human services involvement, and community involvement. And we are very focused on doing what we need to do to get there. The chief already talked to you about how important it is to make sure that we have a police force that is resourced, that is trained, and reflects the values of Washington, D.C. And we have been very focused on recruiting D.C. residents, and we will get to 4,000 in the next 4 years. And the chief is also committed to make sure that those additional officers are not closed up in their cars, but on foot, on bike, on segways, all across the District of Columbia. We also have some tough questions to ask ourselves about building more affordable housing. There is not a single bigger issue in the District of Columbia, but we also have to be willing to think bigger, and we have to challenge, not just us in the room, but we have to challenge all policymakers who will weigh in on these ideas. How can we get more units? How can we, in some cases, where it makes sense, make our buildings taller or more dense? How can we make sure that we are making it easier for the development community to get permits when it comes to affordable housing, just as easy or even faster as with luxury housing? How can we make sure that our tax codes make sense and don't penalize the construction of affordable housing, but incent it? These are the types of questions that we have to ask ourselves. And just like we learned with constructing all across the city short-term family housing facilities, that the affordable housing problem is not just a Ward 8 problem, or a Ward 7 problem, or a Ward 6 problem. It's an all 8 wards problem. And so all 8 wards have to be a part of the solution. So I've charged our team with looking across the city and setting goals for each part of the city to reach, so that we can reach our goals by 2025. I've also charged our team with making sure that we're looking every single day at how DC government can be more seamless, easier, more personalized, and deliver services for our residents in more efficient ways. But I got to tell you, on the heels of a 10-inch snowstorm, I'm pretty proud of how DC government is operating. Let's give them a big round of applause. So one way that we're going to improve service delivery, and we're very focused on wards 7 and 8. I feel like we have a unique opportunity in our city right now to do the most for communities that have had the least investment in the history of the District of Columbia, and we intend to do it. I am going to transform our Deputy Mayor's Office for Greater Economic Opportunity, and I'm going to widen its focus. It had been focused on DOES and DSLBD, which are very important, but also citywide responsibilities. And I want to focus them completely on Ward 7 and Ward 8. We're going to create a new office, the Office of the East of the River Services. And this office, under the direction of the city administrator, will be responsible for marshaling the resources of our entire government for people who live in Ward 7 and Ward 8. And I'm also pleased to announce that the new executive director for the office is Tim White. Tim, please stand up. Tim is currently serving as the Chief of Staff at the Department of Employment Services, and prior to that, he had been serving in agency coordination in DMPED and Brian in the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development. He's a resident of Ward 8, and he is looking forward to getting started on Monday, I guess, on Monday. And I'm also very pleased to highlight a few other of our team members who have worked hard from day one in our administration and are taking on new responsibilities. And Lindsay Parker is another person